not everything a part of any job is amazing and great. It's not what we're saying, right? There's always the, we call it the eat shit box. Like people love to feel like they're contributing and being part of something bigger than themselves. No founder started a business wanting to be like everybody else. But somewhere along the way, they're a victim of their own success and they start to have the same problems as everybody else. If you're not willing to kind of look in the mirror and recognize where you have to change, then the organization's not going to be able to do that either. Like culture, it resists process and structure. If you try and over-structure it or over-process it or being like, our culture looks like this, it will push back harder if you try and control it too much. Then when are you most present? When you're interested, when you're curious, when you're being creative, when you're thoughtful, when you're, interacting and connecting with the people there in a way that challenges you and helps you grow. And just as much as the individual can go through emotional growth and, self-awareness journey and spirituality or whatever that means to you, businesses can go through the same. We are just groups of people all together, right? Like if you can create that culture where you're finding beauty in that struggle, where you're finding enjoyment and presence in that, then there is no one that can stop you when you're there.
Back, Wellness Ninjas, to another episode of the Wellness Dojo Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Craik, and super excited to be back for another episode. I got my man Adam here. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kyle. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Can you start off just give the audience just a little bit of insight? Who are you? What do you do? All the spiel.
Okay. I feel like that could be a very long answer.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, my name's Adam Kolozetti, born and raised right here in Calgary. So, this is my hometown. Let's see. My trade, what I did out of school, was aerospace engineering. So loved like airplanes and Star Trek and anything that flies and things like that. And then ended up actually starting my own business doing culture for businesses and organizations. And, love doing that and love dealing with people and all that kind of stuff. But we actually originally connected over martial arts because I've done Muay Thai for years and years and years and years, trained, competed, teach, all those things. And so the idea of martial arts and fitness and mental health has been, I would say, a key sort of ingredient to my journey as an entrepreneur, as a husband and father. I've got 3 kids and a crazy dog at home. So very, like, kind of in a nutshell, it's my story.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that we actually have so much in common too. Like even when we were first intro to each other, it was like, yeah, they might kind of get along a little bit. But then as we talked more and more, is like, and even now, like hearing more about you, even like your dog, like I've got this crazy dog walking around right now that has no boundaries.
Yeah, so she's trying to get in, right?
She's trying to get in to see us. Yeah. So there might be some, yeah, there she is. Yeah. So, I want to talk a lot about company culture today because I think that's something that's, it's not untouched, but I think there's aspects of it that could be really, really interesting that people don't talk about. And I'll give you an example. I was excited to have you on. I was telling somebody about it, and they're asking me, "What are we going to talk about on the show?" I was like, we're going to talk a lot about company culture, like what makes good company culture, those types of things. And their response to me kind of took me back a little bit, but they said it's kind of sad that's something that people need. Right? In the sense that it's sad that leaders need that. And I said, well, that's one perspective. I said, but you could also look at it and say how cool that people have a career where they can help that, because that just goes to show that there are leaders out there who care about those things, who are willing to invest in those things for their teams. So with that being said, I'm curious, like what makes good company culture? And that's a loaded question, but let's dive into it.
Yeah, that is a tricky question, right? Like when you ask people, it's like asking someone about like humor or something, right? It's easier to describe what it's not than what it is, right? Because that's the tricky thing about emotions. It's feeling. So, maybe I'll start with what it's not. And I use the Sunday night test, right? Like today's Sunday, tonight before you go to bed, are you like anxious? Are you like, oh my God, I can't believe I got another week coming up and I'm gonna have to deal with that person or that project or that client or whatever it is that you do. Or are you kind of excited? Or are you like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get back into that. I was super excited about this new thing that we started. I'm excited to work with, my work bestie and all these types of things, right? I mean, not everything a part of any job is amazing and great. It's not what we're saying, right? There's always the, we call it the eat shit box. Like there's that for everything, right? But, if the majority of it could be pretty awesome, something that energizes you and excites you, then that's pretty cool. And I think it's not just what you do, it's the people you work with. And for my story, when I started out in the engineering world, I was so focused on working on what I considered to be cool stuff, like airplanes and rockets or guns or whatever. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And so I went out and I did that. I got to work on some cool stuff. But then as I kind of went through my career, I realized that it wasn't what I was doing, it was who I was working with. And it didn't really matter what I was working on. Happiness kind of came from, was I learning? Was I getting joy? Was I interacting with the people around me in a positive way that was making me grow? Right. Mm-hmm. So back to your question, what is good culture? We break culture down, kind of in a few different ways, right? Like there's on the one hand, there's hey, we all love hanging around each other. We're a bunch of buddies at work and all that kind of stuff. But are you productive? Are you successful? Mm-hmm. Right? So if we all are sitting around the campfire playing guitar and it's great and it's amazing, that's cool. But, is there a culture of high performance? Are we succeeding in the market that we're trying to build? Right? Because, if your company is sinking and you're laying people off, that sucks. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So then the next part is, what are you building? What are you working towards? And I think people love to feel like they're contributing and being part of something bigger than themselves, whatever that means to them. So having a voice, having their, whatever your version of a suggestion box is, and knowing that if you put up your hand and say, hey, I saw this cool new AI software, I think it might be cool to try, that someone might answer you and be like, all right, man, let's try it. That's exciting. That's, that's the power of culture, is that you are excited and engaged to be there. And then the last part, storytelling, right? When you're at work, when you come home, are you telling stories about what happened at work and you're super excited? Like you coming home and talk to your spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend or parents or whoever and be like, oh yeah, I guess what happened today was so cool, right? So there's signs of it, but I think from a business perspective, we have to put in that high performance and success piece into it if we're gonna define good or bad. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like there's this balance between camaraderie and purpose, right? And I know that's something that I've recognized with different cultures and communities that I've been a part of, is you can't have like too much of one and not enough of the other. There's no perfect balance by any means, but it's important to have both of those things. Like you said, you can't just be like kumbaya, everything's always like super peaceful and fun and all the time. Like there has to be this level of like, am I contributing to something? Do I have a purpose here? And you mentioned like a voice and those types of things, right? It's like one of the number one reasons why people leave jobs, I think, is because they just don't feel like they're contributing, or they don't feel like they're recognized in contributing, and those types of things, right?
Sure. Especially, people you might consider to be your high performers, right? They learn quick, they grow quick, they're very creative, they're very thoughtful in the way they do things. Money will make you happy up to a point, but then after that, for another, $10,000-$20,000 a year, what's more important to you? What probably is that you're able to make decisions. You're not feeling like you are being controlled or put in a box or whatever, that you've got space to move and grow, and you're like excited to be part of that. Right.
Yeah.
And that can happen. Doesn't matter if you're in a huge corporate organization or you're in a startup or somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Like there's space for that everywhere. But yeah, I've seen it time and time again. The high performers, your best people, they will leave unless they see that they are helping craft the future and they're a part of it. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Interesting. So when it comes to Enta Solutions and what you guys are doing, how do you guys go in and start to, first of all, assess a culture and start to make those ideas of like, okay, where do we need to make improvements, that type of thing? What's the process like?
Well, this is kind of this is where the engineering part of me comes, right? I've been trained to think systematically, and people are messy. Emotions are messy. People behave illogically sometimes, or they're emotional, or they have stuff going at home. So you can't always predict what people are going to do, right? If you get a group of people and you're like, you want them to behave in a certain way, and you come up with this great idea and you do it, and then someone's offended or it has the exact opposite effect, or right. Like you never know, but generally speaking, our process looks a little bit like, if you want to accomplish something in your business, or maybe you're having turnover, people are leaving, and you're like, I've got a culture problem here. Then the first thing is to really define your culture. Like maybe you have your values up on the wall or the website, maybe you don't, but regardless, kind of run through a bit of an emotional workshop around the values. Like, who are you as a business? Why was it created? No founder started a business wanting to be like everybody else. But somewhere along the way, they're a victim of their own success and they start to have the same problems as everybody else. So really pushing on those values, and we pull stories. If you say that you're accountable, well, okay, great. Let's talk about a time when accountability was like the key factor towards success, and really getting people to emotionally resonate with them. And then people can look internally at their values, like maybe they've defined them or not, but they can start to think about how personally it's resonating with the company and what that means. Right. So that's kind of the start, is like, who are you? Right.
Yeah.
And your mission and vision comes along with that. What do you want to be when you grow up? Right. And taking that moment or that space to kind of do that work. And what that does is it really galvanizes the people in that room and gets them excited and emotionally connected to an idea.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can use storytelling to share that with the rest of the organization, however big you are, even if everyone wasn't in the room. So we're trying to get everybody to emotionally resonate with this idea, even if they didn't go through 2 days of workshops and all this kind of stuff.
Is that something that kind of the leaders of an organization need to do better, is kind of getting that story told and resonated throughout their teams as well?
I think so. I think I meet a lot of organizations, that are frustrated because they, maybe they reach out to somebody they want to hire and they interview them, and that person says, "Oh, I've never heard of you guys before." And that's really frustrating for an owner who's been working really hard to make a name for themselves in the business, right?
Yeah.
So things like social media, which we often look at as like a sales or marketing initiative, is actually a platform for you to tell your story in the way that you want it to be told, right? In this day and age, digitally, your story is being told whether you like it or not in some fashion.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, she's being such a pain in the butt today.
It's okay. She has something to say about this, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, like what your story is a big part of it. It's like your buddies, right? You guys have inside jokes. Imagine having that for work, right? And now you're sitting in a room and a situation happens. You're like, you know what? This is just like the, the Bowman project. And everyone's like, oh, right. Yeah. Okay. This is what we have to do or not do.
It's like finding ways to relate things too, right? Yeah. To people. I'm curious too, just in terms of like the leaders of organizations, because this is something that I've heard of a lot. I haven't worked in the corporate world a lot. I've mostly been a business owner my entire life, or at least my entire adult life. But something that I hear a lot is leaders who are very resistant to like change, especially I would imagine in companies that are struggling. They're struggling for a reason, right? There's a resistance to change. There's a resistance to even sometimes making like positive improvements. Is that something that you come across as well? And I'm curious what's the biggest pushback that you guys often come across?
Lots of times in situations like that, you know, as the founder, the leader, like whether it's a big organization or like you said, or like your own business or whatever, there's a journey that comes along with that, right? Like my own personal entrepreneurial journey, you know, it started off, I thought it was all about like business and kind of learning how to market myself and all these extra skills and leadership and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately it was more of a spiritual one, like an internal journey of self-awareness, right? Where am I the problem here, right? Lots of times you meet business owners that are struggling or whatever, and externally you can see like, well, they just did this or that or the other, like they're their own worst enemy or things of that nature, right? And that holds true whether you're a solopreneur or a leader in an organization or a leader of a large organization. If you're not willing to kind of look in the mirror and recognize where you have to change, then the organization's not going to be able to do that either. Because, you know, when I look at my own team, for example, you know, we've grown to about 11 people, and I look at our team and I'm like, wow, the skills it took for my business partner, Caitlin, and I to get us to here was what we have. We're kind of, you know, we're okay with risk. We're creative. We're tenacious. We're determined. We're hardworking, all this kind of stuff. But now we've kind of grown, and I'm like, okay, we don't have the skills, just us, to take it to the next level. If we continue as we're going, we will trip over ourselves or something. So we got to recognize that we need other people with other skills to come to the table and then give away some of that power. And I think as a leader, as an owner, that's terrifying, right? That's scary to let go, right? And then, you know, that propagates down within an organization or group of people. There's lots of different reasons why people are resistant to change, but, you know, often, you know, can the leader kind of look in the mirror and change themselves and then the organization as well? That's the magic trick.
It's interesting. It always does seem to come down to the individual. And there's an interesting kind of phrase that I always think of when I think of my own coaching and my approach to coaching and stuff is that like, it's like the job is not to tell you what to do or where to go. The job is kind of to be your guide to a place you've already been. Right? So it's like, I'm going to guide you through the things you already know about yourself. I'm going to guide you through the things that you already kind of semi understand, and let's just try and navigate to like, how do we get to this new destination with this map that we already have almost. Right. And that's it kind of sounded like what you were saying there a little bit.
Yeah. Like when I think of it in the context of martial arts, you know, when I started taking martial arts, you know, the first thing they do, you know, is fitness, right? The warm-ups are brutal. The classes are like the work is intense. That's what they're doing. That's done on purpose. Like, not only do you need to be fit to compete, let's say, or whatever, but they're pushing you to the point of exhaustion so that you are so tired that your ego there's no room left for it. You're letting go of any preconceived notions that you have. And now you're there and you're tired, but you're still there. Now you're open and you're ready to learn.
Yeah.
Right. And organizations, people, you know, aren't so different. I think that's why sports analogies work so well.
Yeah. I agree.
But, you know, like, it took me 5 years to get a black belt.
Yeah.
It took me 15 to realize that whole time I wasn't learning how to punch and kick. Right.
Yeah.
I was learning how to connect my mind my body and my soul, and just kind of like move and interact with the universe, and how to, go about my life, all these things. Right.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing too, when we, like with martial arts, when you think about the black belt, there's always so much like external like prowess around, like, are you a black belt, or can I get that black belt? I remember being a kid starting and being like, I wanted my black belt so bad, and I wanted it like so fast. I want it now. But you're right. Then when you go through the journey, and then you realize it was never about the skills. Like, it was never about the belts and that type of thing. A funny example, I was just talking to somebody recently. So actually I went on this, I did my first ever sunrise hike. So I'm like hiking in the dark, like in the forest, like pitch black with flashlights. And the person I was hiking with, they were like, oh, it's a good thing you're a black belt. And stuff like that. So we kind of got talking about this, like defending yourself and stuff. And I was like, I mean, like, honestly, like, I feel like I know I could hold my own because I have built these, like the physical reaction time, and I can throw a punch and like those types of things. But like the reality is I didn't actually like work my life to develop those skills. Like, I don't, like, there's probably, I could still get my ass kicked on the street. Like, I probably could. Right. But the things that I took from martial arts are so much more impactful to every other area of my life, my business, relationships, family, friends, like everything. Right.
Absolutely. And you return to the basics, right? Like, I remember I'd had my black belt for a couple of years, and then I just happened to be in a class where it was only me and another person showed up. And I had my instructor, leader of the gym, and we threw a cross for like 50 minutes. I must have thrown 1,000 of the damn things. And it, like, a jab and a cross are like the first punches you learn in like the first class. Yeah. And I think I had this notion that I'd start learning all this fancy craziness, but all we did was go back to the basics, and he like picked it apart. He was like just breaking it down into like every single movement. Do you understand every single muscle that is firing, and the order in which it is that's stuck in my mind as like, wow, I have so much more to learn about the basics. Yeah. Right. The more I learn, the more I just go back to how I'm standing and where I'm stepping. Yeah. And that's it. All that other stuff is nothing compared to these like tiny little incremental things that I'm learning that are, even about how I visualize what's happening. And I think your leadership journey is similar. Yeah. Right. The energy you have when you walk in a room, right? Whether you like it or not. My team is 10 people. It's not a huge team. Still, when I walk in a room, if I say something, like, people are watching to see what I'm doing, right? Yeah. Even if I say nothing, I could walk in a room and sit with them for an hour. But if like I sigh, or my eyebrow raises, or my body language is slouched, people are wondering, what am I thinking? Did I not do the good job? Like, right? Yeah. So, there are all the skills and things, but what's the energy you're bringing in, right? And that's when we bring it back to like your culture of an organization. If you could speak to it a little bit in terms of energetics, like, what does the room feel like? Yeah. Right? That psychological safety. Is there like an energy flowing, like engagement? My favorite definition of engagement is there's energy can flow freely. It doesn't get stuck in passive aggressiveness. It doesn't get stuck in confusion. It doesn't get stuck in, irritation or annoyance or something, right? Yeah. It can flow. Yeah. Yeah. I
love that analogy. And I've had just recently had another like similar experience where me and during the summer, we were running some summer classes, but they're very hit and miss in terms of like how many people can make it. People are away and all these things. So it ended up being just me and one of the other black belt that helps me with the club. So we were working on blitzing, just back and forth, like, because both of us were like, oh man, I don't feel it today. Like, I'm just like, my body feels stiff. I don't want to do this. So we're like, let's just go back to the basics and just like drill just like one basic movement. And we did it for like 45 minutes. We just drilled one basic movement. And afterwards we were both like, man, we need to do this more again. Like, we need to get back to this. And I think maybe sometimes a lot of, communities, companies, whatever it is, like, they just need to get back to the basics too. And I bet that's something I would imagine that you guys see, right? Is can you just get back to the basics of like what built you to this point as like a starting point? Is that?
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter how big your company gets, right? Like as you grow, you do have to acquire, some more sophistication and some more systems and things of that nature. But, the same skills, like I don't know how many times I've made a mistake and then gone back and be like, I read like 4 books on that told me, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I even made notes on it. I went to a training on it. And then I did exactly that because I was like, oh yeah, I knew better. I'll do it my own way or whatever. And so like I understood it, but I didn't understand it until I felt the pain of it. And then I was like, okay, exactly like they said, that's how I should do it. Right. So I find myself with my organization returning again and again and again and again to these basic ideas that I thought I understood. But until I had lived it and had felt the pain, then I didn't really. And we see that with our clients too. Like we'll give them advice or like do this or do that, or we built you this or whatever. And sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. And I think that's why this idea of change is so important, right? People may or may not embrace this new tool or, software is always a good example, right? Here's this new software that's going to make everything so easy. Maybe they're going to adopt it. Maybe they're not. But at the end of the day, the basic idea is, do you believe that this can help you do your job better or achieve what you're trying to achieve better? Yeah. Right?
Yeah. It makes me think about martial arts and competition again too. It's like you practice all these things, but it's like, or you learn all these things. I always tell my students, you'll learn so much more in competition. And I think that's kind of reminiscent of being in business as well. You can read all the books you want. You can learn all these different things, but until you go and you try it, until you go and you like apply it and actually test it, you don't know. Right. And I think that applies to building culture as well. Right. It's like, yeah, we'll try and do fun things and let's see if it works. And like, if this one that doesn't stick, then like it's all learning constantly. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing about nudging groups of people, right? The one, if you do this exact same thing over here and then repeat it over here, it might not work. So, maybe you are feeling that your people are disengaged or upset about something. So you're like, okay, well, I'm going to organize a barbecue and we're going to have an afternoon and then, that'll fix everything. We actually saw a client do this. They held the barbecue and then they asked everyone to go back to work at 4:00 or whatever. Like the barbecue was from like 1 to 3. Everyone's back to work at 4 to 5. And in like one foul swoop, they just told people that it wasn't valuable to them. Like if they wanted to go back to work, they could. If they wanted to go home, do you know what I mean? And I'm sure someone just ran a calculation and said, well, we don't want it to cost us more than this amount of money. So when we talk about team building and like emotional, resonance of getting people to be a little bit vulnerable and talk about what they're feeling, that can be tricky. That's why it's sometimes useful to have outsiders come in. They can help create a better safe space. But even if you don't, you say, think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish here. Is it people are leaving? Is it that people aren't talking to each other? Like we had a client is an engineering firm. And, typical office building, right? You got to kind of walk around a square and in the middle is the elevators and all that kind of stuff. And the accountants were on one side and the drafters were on one side and the engineers were on the other. So they couldn't see each other. You have to kind of walk around to see each other. Yeah. And they're having communication issues. They weren't talking to each other. They had mistakes, all this kind of stuff because they were emailing each other back and forth rather than walking around and talking to each other. So he got scooters, like those ones we see outside. He got them and he brought them in and they did a little safety lesson and he had scooters in the hallway and he said, there, now you have no excuse not to zip around over there and talk to your... So now they have scooters and they zip around. I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing.
That is amazing.
Right? But he was saying by doing that, like, one, look, we have a lot of fun around here.
Mm-hmm.
We're very creative, but we talk to each other and, here you go. And I just thought that was such a cool example of, because that same solution, if you took it to, I don't know, an organization that was like very stiff, maybe you're wearing suits every day, right? And you tried to bring in scooters, like no one would use it. They'd be confused. It would be too detached from how they're operating.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting too, because I would imagine that that's also a struggle that people face, where maybe they are trying to almost like rebrand their culture within their company. Maybe they've always been that stiff suit and tie kind of firm, and now they want to try and make things looser and more fun and stuff like that. I can imagine that would be like a really tricky thing to navigate.
It would be. Yeah, totally. And it's not a one and done thing. Like, I was working at an organization as part of an acquisition, and it was a clear line in the sand between old and new, and people weren't talking to each other. So we're like, all right, let's create like a monthly hangout, whatever. And I had to, buy the chips and the pop and, have the thing in the kitchen. And then the first time, like 2 people showed up, and then but it was like probably 4 or 5 months of these things with nobody showing before it finally kicked over. Like, people will like kind of watch and see, like there'll be a few early adopters or things, but it's not going to happen over. It's gonna be like a gradual process, and it can be kind of a thankless process for the people trying to push it.
Yeah.
Because the initial feedback is going to be very little. It's going to be, you're going to be like, well, we put all this work into planning and hosting this awesome event, and like only half the people showed, and the ones they did, they only stayed for 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I encourage people to just like keep going. Like, that's the thing. It has to be consistent. It has to, people will start to recognize that you're serious, and then the leadership has to show. That's it. Right? If leadership starts showing up with Hawaiian shirt Fridays, eventually someone else is going to wear a Hawaiian shirt on Fridays. And then as soon as the second person does, a third will, fourth will. And by the time you hit like 5 or 6, then everybody will be doing it. Yeah. Right?
You mentioned something earlier with martial arts about ego, and how like there comes a point where you kind of have to let go of the ego, and you're just doing the work, and you're just doing it for the greater good, or for the purpose of why you're doing it. Like, you let go of the ego of the black belt, for example, and you focus on like the purpose of why you're training. It makes training a lot easier, a lot less pressure. That comes to mind because an example for me as a business owner, so I like to try and do community events as well. And oftentimes, as you described, like you set up these events and stuff, and then like one person shows, or nobody shows, or 3 people show, but it's like doesn't go the way that you imagined it in your mind, and your ego gets hurt, right? But recently, so I started doing this group called Pod Ninjas, where it's like a book club, but you listen to one podcast episode, and then you meet up and you just discuss the episode, right? Yeah. So it's like a low commitment book club almost. You only have to listen to one episode. But so I hosted my first one last month, and going into it, like I told myself, and actually like believed it and felt it. I was like, it honestly doesn't matter if even one person shows up or nobody shows up, because the purpose of it, like I am going into it with the idea of like, I just want to have good conversations with people, similar to like doing this podcast. Right. And I feel like when I let go of my ego for that, no matter how many people show up, like it's a positive experience. And I think people feel that from me as well, that like, oh, he's here just because he wants to. It's not because he's like, feels like it has to be something. I could imagine that happens a lot with companies trying to adjust their I'll say vibes, right? Is like, if it feels too forced, like there's like they're trying to achieve something too, I don't know, forced is the word that comes to mind. Yeah,
you can't process it out, right? Like, I'll give you an example. Like when we design a workshop, we're very, we're engineers. Kayla and I are engineers, but we're trying to engineer like kind of an emotional journey. But I can't process that out too much. I can't be like, okay, I'm going to say this, and this is what I want them to feel, and this is what I want them to do. And this, all I can do is like, we're going to create a space for like sharing some stories. I'm going to share first. I'm going to encourage the leader beforehand to like also do the same. And then we wait and see. And if the entire group chooses not to share, then so be it. And we move on. But like, it never happens. So all we can do is like create the space and see what happens. Right. And I think that idea that all you can do is like try and gently nudge, like culture, it resists process and structure. If you try and over structure it or over process it, or being like, our culture looks like this, we meet every morning at 2, like it people want to do what they want to do. They want to do because they want to do it. So if you, it will push back harder if you try and control it too much. So I think that lack of control that's required to change your culture is really, really terrifying for a successful leader or business owner. Because you're saying is like, okay, well, I'm just going to like put chips in the kitchen and a poster, and that's it. I'm not going to do anything, and I'm going to see what happens and see if anyone shows up. And then next time, okay, they liked those chips more than that chips, I'll put more of these ones. And then I'm going to watch, and then like I'm going to put better coffee and then see what happens. And then like, right? You're just like nudging and watching, and there's no, I think that's the kind of painful part about it, is you want so badly for it to be something, but you can't push it. You can't control it. You can't cajole it. You can't, all you can do is create the right space and kind of see what happens. And then, once you start to see those early adopters, there's lots of other things you can do to try and kind of accelerate that process. But you're right. You can't force it. It'll never happen. Right. If you do see people try and force it, the reverse happens. You try and tell people, no, we're creative around here. We listen well. This is what we do around here, but you don't actually do that. Then people are going to see right through you.
I was going to say, you can sense that when you see different communities and stuff that are trying so hard to be something versus communities that they just are that thing.
Yeah.
There's a difference. It's hard to explain. I can't put it to words, but
exactly. That's why this stuff is so hard. You're like, I don't know. I just love the energy of that place.
Yeah.
Like, well, what was it about it? I don't know. It was 1,000 little things from the time you walk to the door. It's you ever been to a place where you walk in and it's like kind of stale. There's no art on the wall. And the receptionist like barely looks up when you walk in and kind of grunts at you or whatever. And you're like, oh man, all right. And other places you walk in and there's like, maybe there's plants, maybe there's some art. The receptionist got their kids' drawings up, and that person's like, oh, hey, welcome. Who are you here to see? Fantastic. Please sign in. Oh, would you like a water? And then somebody comes in. Hey, thanks so much for coming. Come this way. Like, especially as someone interviewing for a job, like which place would you rather work? Right. And it used to be that stuff didn't matter. You were happy to have a job. You put your nose down and didn't complain, and that was the end of it. But now, I'm an elder millennial. That's what I claim. But, the Gen Zers, the new kids coming up into the workforce, that is something that they've grown up and been taught to like look for and ask in a workforce, right? They want flexibility. They want autonomy. They want to choose if they want to come to the office or work from home or whatever, So I think whether businesses like it or not, this cultural battle is coming. It's already here. Yeah, I think.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You guys organize some really fun events and stuff like that too, and I think that there's a real crossover in terms of personal life and business life. I think that's pretty that's pretty well known and pretty obvious. But I'm curious for you, what do you notice as that crossover? As you've kind of cultivated this amazing culture, you can see it through just interacting with your teammates. I've met some of them, and even just seeing like even what you guys put out on your website, your social media stuff. You can sense that, right? I'm curious what the crossover is for you in terms of how that company culture and that work life actually impacts the personal life as well.
Well, I think, I grew up probably like you being taught this idea of work-life balance, right? That, don't work too much because the rest of your life, it has to be in balance and all this kind of stuff. I think that was very true for a long time, that like work was work, and work is kind of where you got your, maybe your hunger for intellectual growth or collaboration with other people or whatever.
Yep.
And then you got maybe your spiritual growth or your emotional growth from whatever, your family or your church or wherever, right? It was very segregated. But I think what we've seen now with the way businesses is run now is that you want everything from work and from your personal life. So you want to be emotionally connected. You want to be intellectually challenged. You want to feel like if you need to be vulnerable and share something with someone, you can do that. And then that bleeds right into your personal life, so that there is no difference between the you at work and the you at home. And I think a lot of people really struggle with that transition, right? I'm very stoic and professional at work, but I'm a total goofball at home, right? If I wear my heart out on my sleeve outside of work, and I'm a very sort of compassionate, giving person, then I want to work somewhere that also shares those values, so that it's kind of blended together. And I think with things like remote work and all this kind of stuff, what it allows for is like 8 to 5 is not like you're putting on one hand and putting on the other. If for whatever reason you need to go to your kid's school for a couple hours and do that, then go do that. And if you got to finish something up later tonight, well, that's your choice. And right, I don't really care when you do it, just do it. Right. So I think, but culturally that has to kind of, when we talk about culture, that has to integrate into the people you work with, the expectations of your boss and all this kind of stuff. Right. Yeah.
It's like, there's a place for both. Like there's a place for everything in specific spots too, right? Like maybe you can't wear your heart on your sleeve in every aspect of your work, but maybe there's ways that you can. Authenticity really kind of rings through when you were talking about that. And if you can still be your authentic self, but still wear the roles and act accordingly to how you need to act, I think that's really important in both like work and like in your home life.
Oh, right? Yeah. And I think, we talked about storytelling before, and I think especially as a, a small business owner, people will hire you because they like you, and then they'll figure out a way to pay you is kind of what I've learned. Right. Even if they have the need for something, if they meet you and they're just kind of not jiving with you or whatever, they'll move on. They'll get something else, or that problem's not much of a priority, right? Like, so I think telling your story in an authentic way, being authentic, this is why things like social media are really powerful right now, because you can be authentic on there. You can be vulnerable. Gone are the days where it's just like advertising, right? Who is Kyle? Who is Adam? Right? Are these interesting people? Yeah. I can't tell you how much easier it's been for me in cases to close big giant deals, because I walk in the first time and they're like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. You know what? I watched a bunch of your videos, thought they're pretty cool. I'm like, okay, this person has already decided that they trust me. Yeah. Before I've been here 3 seconds. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Now we can talk about trusting me with something as important as the culture and performance of their organization, right? That's a big deal. It is. Right?
It is, and it's a different lens than people typically view social media, right? Because people typically are like, either they feel so much pressure that they have to post, or they think it's such a negative place where you're constantly seeing everybody's issues and problems and their happy lives and stuff like that. But like it's a way that you can express yourself. And like I've often said that, I'm like, I don't love being on social media all the time, but like I enjoy the fact that my Instagram account is almost like a resume. It's like this, I share meaningful things on there that resonate with me and like who I am. And it almost is like a filter for if, for example, there was a company that I wanted to do business with, and they looked at my social media and they were like, oh, this guy's like a total goof or something. Like, we don't want to work with this guy. Yeah. Right. that filters that out, because that relationship is probably not going to be good long term anyways. So it kind of does help navigate that thing beforehand, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely an argument to be said that even though we're more connected technologically than we've ever been before, we are less connected emotionally than we have been before.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. If you do that right, and you're networking and generally connecting with people, then something like social media can actually amplify that, right? So it can be your best or worst tool for connection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm curious, like, how happiness plays into all this. Like, how does happiness play into company culture and somebody's personal happiness within a company? Is that something we can cultivate?
Yeah. Well, I think happiness is ultimately what we are all in search for. Right? The fact that we have these constructs of things like money or work or whatever, they're just like, ultimately we're all trying to pursue happiness. You hear stories of a billionaire that's miserable, or somebody who's been through a lot of hardships, and you meet them and they're like the happiest person in the world, right? So I think if you can understand that happiness does not lie beyond the cognitive horizon, right? I'll accomplish this, or I'm going on my vacation in the summer, I'll be happy then, or that type of stuff, right? Like, even vacations, the anticipation of a vacation brings you more joy than the actual vacation itself, right? So when in terms of happiness, it's I think the ability to be present. And if we're talking about work, then when are you most present? When you're interested, when you're curious, when you're being creative, when you're thoughtful, when you're interacting and connecting with the people there in a way that challenges you and helps you grow and all that kind of stuff. You're not thinking about, oh my God, this guy's an idiot, or like your brain's not like, if I have to hear that lady say this one more time, right? Or what time is it, right?
Yeah.
If you go through a whole day and you're just like connecting and being creative and super excited about what you do, and there's times when you got to do maybe there's, I don't know, some data entry or something you got to do that sucks, whatever, but you still do it. And then that feels pretty good. Like, you'll be tired, but you come home and you're energized. You're still happy. You're still like, hey, yeah, like, oh, it was a good day. I'm tired, but hey, you're still energized, right?
Yeah. It's like the cliche, it's like time flies when you're having fun.
Exactly. Right? And that's the beautiful thing about cliches, right? Like, you hear them a million times, you might roll your eyes, but then when it's actually happening to you, you're like, oh yeah, that's totally true.
Yeah, they all come from somewhere.
Yeah, right? So, it's like, I can go to a 60-minute lecture. Like, I don't know, when I was in school, right? We had 75-minute classes, and there were some where it was like, I checked my watch and we were like 11 minutes in, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, it feels like it's been an hour.
Yeah. And then there's others where I'm like, oh wow, we're done. It's 3 hours.
Yeah.
What? Like, where did that go? I was just so engaged in that topic or that whatever. So I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do, right? We're not trying to dwell on the past or be anxious about the future. If we're just like right here and like super engaged in what we're doing, that's where the magic happens. That's where high performance happens. That's where groups of people accomplish amazing feats together. Right?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to describe company culture, right? Is like, are you there and are you engaged and curious, and like, is time flying by? Right? Are you constantly tracking every hour when you're at work? Like, if that's probably a pretty good sign that something's off.
Right. Yeah, and you're contributing part of things. So, and I think people can sense when something's off, right? Like, you have someone that like never is always, goes above and beyond, and then one day they make a mistake. It's not a big mistake. It's like tiny little thing. You're like, oh, that person never makes a mistake. And then the next day they make a second one, right? If you're in an organization where there's a culture of that curiosity and feedback and all that kind of stuff, then you should be thinking, oh my God, I should ask this person what's up. Something's up with them. Those two examples on their own are trivial, right?
Yeah.
Is it, not really even worth bringing up, but the fact that I care enough to ask about the 1% means we have a culture of high performance here, and we're wondering how you're doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what's up?
Yeah, that's a really cool way of putting it too, because a lot of people see it as black and white, where it's like, no, we're either high performing or we're like empathetic and engaging and curious and stuff. But those things actually play into each other. They actually support each other. Right.
Yeah, 100%. So, I think just as much as the individual can go through emotional growth and, self-awareness journey and spirituality or whatever that means to you, businesses can go through the same. We are just groups of people all together, right? Like we call it the whole business. We say self-actualization if we're all pursuing this balance of mind, body, and soul, whenever that means to us. Then if organizations are just groups of people, then the analogy is culture, process, and tools. And if those are all balanced together, then that's where the magic is, right? If that skews out of balance, that's where you waste a lot of money or you start losing or whatever.
Yeah. If I didn't know beforehand, I would have a strong inclination to know that you have a martial arts background just based off of what you were just saying with how that kind of relates with like the mind, body, and spirit. Like that's such a martial arts built-in principle. And it makes me curious, just kind of a generalized question, but how has your experience through martial arts in life impacted you as a business owner or founder?
Well, I think what I realized, martial arts, if you take it long enough, becomes a spiritual journey, in my opinion, or in my experience. Entrepreneurship for me, very, very similar, same thing. Like, there's so much stress and so much weight and there's like so many decisions that have to be made, and like the line between success and failure is so thin, and that pressure is sometimes like unbearable that, as a business owner, there are times when you're pushed into a place of acute fear, of failure, of I've done the wrong thing. I don't know what to do next. I have other people depending on me. And it's really hard to get out of that, which is why coaches are so effective. You don't learn martial arts without a coach. Having a business coach or a life coach or whatever kind of coach is also super effective. But if your mind and your spirit can be in a place of abundance, where you're seeing opportunity everywhere and you're calm and you're excited and you're looking, you're like, yeah, cash flow kind of sucks right now, but like, I always figure it out, right? Like, what can we do here? Like, let's hop on the phone. Let's call Kyle. Like, what's Kyle doing? Maybe he's got some work for us. Like, if your body, mind, and soul can be in a space that you can look at these issues and think, not that you're trapped, but that you're free. They're like, wow, how amazing that I'm free to have gone down this path where I can be my own boss and make my own decisions, right? Before, when I was in the corporate world or whatever, I was feeling trapped and wasn't happy. And now I've made this choice, and how amazing that I'm able to have these problems and deal with them and problem solve and all this kind of stuff. It's really testing me. It's really pushing me. It's really putting me in an uncomfortable place. And I think, that becomes a spiritual journey of success. And, that's ultimately the hard part. Same with leadership, I think, is that at the heart of it lies that painful experience of looking in the mirror and figuring out, like, where am I the problem? My mindset is the problem, right? That's why you have, people that help you with mindset or manifestation and all this kind of stuff, because you're just trying to get out of that place of fear and into a place of ultimately hopefulness and happiness, right?
Yeah. And it really speaks to the importance in any community or culture of having those guides, those people who are willing to push you, but in a way that they're there to pick you up as well, right? They're going to push you to those limits, but then they're also going to be the ones that are like, okay, let's figure this out. How to, I think of my martial arts instructor, and he always like pushed me to try to like go and challenge yourself against that, or like, you lost that fight, now like we challenged up to that fighter that we lost to last time, and we're a little bit closer, right? But I know it was painful to go and lose again, but we got some more clues now. Let's tweak it. Now we know we need to work more here. Having people like that surround you, I think it's like the only way to grow. Like, you can't do that kind of work yourself. Otherwise it just becomes like, it's just a lot of work you need that outside perspective to help you.
Totally. Right? I mean, you think about a competition. I mean, in a fight, you're literally in a fight. Someone is trying to hurt you. It doesn't matter if it's a point fight or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
That's intimidating. That's scary. That's terrifying. You're like, get in there, and you know, when you first start competing, you're so jacked up with this, like, because you're driven by essentially fear, and you run in there and you burn out all your energy, and it's this like brawl at the center of the ring, and whoever's standing at the end of it, right? That's how often the first competitions go. But then, could you eventually get to a place where like the real professionals go, where they're calm and they're at home they're competing, they're almost meditating as they're competing, right? Their mind and their body is so connected, and like spiritually, that's what gives them the ability to almost looks like they're able to predict the future, right? The best fighters just like I'll give you an example. I was sparring one of the fighters at our gym. He was just so amazing, like world champion, so good. And we were sparring, and it popped into my head to do kind of a move where I was going to fake a kick and do a thing, whatever. And then he did it to me. And I was like, oh, I was just going to do that. And he's like, I know. I was like, I didn't do anything. All I did was like tense my foot just so, or like, you know, my one ear twitched, or some part of him was able to pick up on that so acutely that he was able to predict exactly what I was going to do, a complex set of movements. Yeah. And I always think of that. The only way he could have done that is if he is just so in tune with the universe at that moment and so calm that it's just flowing through him. And that's kind of how I view martial arts, competition, fighting, entrepreneurs the same, right? You're in a battle every day. Business is the same. You're constantly fighting to, you know, get ahead of the next guy. But I think, if you can create that culture where you're finding beauty in that struggle, where you're finding enjoyment and presence in that, then there's no one that can stop you when you're there, right?
Yeah, and I think part of that too, what you just described, is just the fact that you're drilling the foundations and the basics so much. I've had that experience before in a fight where, like, I do something and I walk away from it, I'm like, how the hell did I do that? Like, how did I know that kick was coming this way and I was able to slip and get my kick up? Like, you just don't even recognize it. But then when you go back and you reflect on it, you're like, oh, it's because I've drilled that step so many times and then done it with partners in class that it was an automatic reaction. It's like, when they step this way, I step this way. And I think that's something as well that's so powerful in terms of work life as well, and just building and cultivating whatever connections you have there. It's like, it does take repetitions. Like, you have to go and like do the things over and over.
People don't like uncertainty, right? Psychological safety doesn't exist when you're uncertain, right? Everyone has got that friend or family member or coworker where, like, every time you talk to them, you're not sure who's showing up. Is it the like erratic, crazy person, or is it the totally cool, like awesome person? And I never quite know who it's going to be. So therefore I'm like not feeling quite sure or safe.
Walking on eggshells.
Yeah. And that happens at work all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So if you can get rid of that uncertainty and everyone's like certain that whatever happens, I'm going to get the like calm, thoughtful person. I'm going to get the curious person. Yeah. Right. And that only happens through consistent repetition, right? That's like the reps.
So true.
Right.
So true. Yeah.
So, you can't fake things like psychological safety or intuition.
Yeah.
Right. That's why this cultural thing is so hard. You are changing people's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, behaviors. Like, it all comes from this touchy-feely stuff, right? And sometimes we get challenged on that. Like, no, all I want to do is have my team execute better. Why are we spending time here? And I'm like, well, because this is where your problem is, right? So, yeah, I mean, you either believe that or you don't. And I'm not going to convince you of it if you don't already. But if you do, then, we can, we've got some cool ways of really taking that and amplifying it.
Yeah.
Right?
Love it. I got one more question for you. Cool. So this is not my question. This is a question that my last guest wrote.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So I'm going to read this question to you. I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know what it says.
Okay.
And then I'll give you the opportunity to leave a question for my next guest.
Ooh.
You up for that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. We kind of talked about this. This is good. So why does happiness matter to you?
Ooh. Why does happiness matter to me? My wife said something interesting to me not too long ago. She said, listen, I've supported you when you left your high-paying corporate job and took on this crazy business thing and brought our family through it. And she's like, I didn't even care that we make less money and that it's been a struggle and all this stuff. But she's like, you better be the happiest mofo around, because you have that freedom and you're able to make that choice. So don't ever come home and be miserable because you're here. And I think about that because, happiness is important to me because I want to show up as the best version of myself. And I can't achieve my full potential if I'm not happy. Like, it doesn't matter if I'm weary or tired. If I'm happy, then I'll play with my kid when he wants to play Legos or wrestle or whatever. And 100% I'll help my daughter with her homework or drive her to dance or, I'll be able to listen to my wife talk about what's going on in her world without trying to fix it. Right. Like, if I'm happy and I'm present, that's when I'm going to show up awesome for the most important people in my life.
I love that. It's like such a beautiful form of accountability that she showed you, right?
Yeah, totally. And I just was like, wow, thank you for that. That's what support really means. Is like, it's not the, no matter what, I'll support you. You'll be fine. You'll do that. Although, that feels nice sometimes, but it's really the like smack upside the head and like smarten up. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So,
It's like there's a time and a place again for both of those things, right? Like I'm sure you also get the like if you're struggling or something, it's like, okay, let's figure this out. Like, are you okay? Like, what do you need and stuff like that. But then at the same time, there's that place for
right.
Get it together, man. Like you chose this.
Yeah, and I think you have different people in your life that give you those things at different times.
Yeah.
Right. So. Yeah, that's a cool question. I love the idea. I got to think of a good one.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll let you write it down when we sign off on this. Okay. But no, this has been so fun. It's been really good. I appreciate you putting up with my psychopathic dog at the beginning. She's finally calmed down now. Oh my goodness.
It's okay. We're best friends now.
Yeah, you guys are good friends now. Exactly. Yeah, I'll be having a conversation with her after this. But no, this was really fun. I really appreciate you coming on the show and chatting, and I always appreciate just like furthering our relationship a little bit better too. Yeah. So this was cool.
Well, thanks. Yeah, this has been fantastic. Can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, likewise. All right. And thanks to everybody for listening and watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.